Welcome to the Creating Opportunities podcast. This is a place where we help smart, ambitious professionals create better relationships for success. And why? Because people matter. They're messy, but they make life better and they matter. And I am your host, Cassandra. I am a speaker, trainer, an iced coffee lover. It's important you know that. And I am here to help you make deeper connections. So let's get into it. Okay, thank you so much for joining today, everyone. And today I want to welcome my guest. This is Grewal. She will introduce herself in just a minute, but I am so excited for this conversation because when we had sort of been talking ahead of time, she brought up social currency, which is something we haven't talked about here. I don't think everyone even heard of that. And I think it's something that more people need to know. But before we get into it, Ash, please introduce yourself. What do we need to know about you?
Absolutely. Where do we begin? First and foremost, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here and connect with your audience. The best way for your audience to understand who I am is I've spent the past 15 years on the corporate side as a sales strategist for leading tech brands. I was most recently the VP of Global Partnerships at Rocked, where I helped them scale from an $82 million valuation to $2.5 billion in 3 years. And after I had achieved a lot of the goals I had set out for myself in the tech world, I decided that I wanted to make more of an impact at scale. So I'm now on that founder journey. I started a company called the Overachievers, and we've now reached 10 million plus women to date in less than 12 months. And I've now focused on growing out our social presence into more of an exclusive membership community to empower each and every woman to see herself as a change maker capable of creating change in all aspects of her life.
Okay, before we get into what we were going to talk about today, I need to know, how did you reach those 10 million people?
I wish I could tell you that I had a rinse and repeat playbook, but it's funny, when we look to understand authenticity, I started this social media page as an outlet for myself. I felt like throughout my tenure as a minority female in the tech world and in just such a male dominated environment, I really wanted to have a voice in expressing some of the realities of what it means and where those challenges are. And so I was a little bit hesitant about putting my face out there. So I started sharing clips from powerhouse women like Sheryl Sandberg and Sally Krawcheck for what I felt resonated. And some of them were a little bit more controversial topics, but really quickly, the algorithm started pushing it out and reaching a wide audience through Reels. So I kind of just kept up with the momentum and really staying true to, again, what evoked emotion within me, because I think that was like a relatable experience for a lot of women. And I think consistency is key as well. I started connecting with the women, just really listening to my audience, and the consistency I think was key.
Nice.
Yeah.
Consistency, I think I was about to make a reel about that later today. Like,
Just keep
if you
going.
want to win, it's consistency. Like, that's what I say with when I built my first YouTube channel. I did not have success the first year. I did a whole year of content before a video that was 3 months old decided to take off. And I went from 1,000 a year to 10,000 in the next 5 months to 100,000. All
That's
happened
amazing.
it was nothing, and then it happened very quickly. It's
That is
like, but I needed that
exactly.
year of nothing to get to that.
It's so true. And I'm fortunate to
It's
have a
very
lot of
true.
creators in my network who I was inspired by their journeys. And I know how hard it is to start when you're first getting off the ground. You can post 100 videos and it's that one that really gets boosted through the algorithm. And then from there, your other videos start to get promoted and things like that.
Yep.
So I think as long as you're staying true to your mission and being honest about what it is that you're trying to express and the consistency, then I think you'll get there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The way I like to think of it is like, yes, it's not about a viral hit. Like, people
Yeah.
want virality. You need one that takes off, but because of that consistency, when one takes off, those people like you and
Yeah.
they go, wait, for reals,
Right.
let me see everything else. If you only have one that's great, and
Yeah.
now that person that loved your one reel is going, oh, I don't care. But if
Yeah.
they're now seeing, oh, she's got a new one that comes out every 2 days. That's why that consistency matters, because you can make a fan real fast with it. But of course, like you
Absolutely.
said, it has to be authentic. It's just sometimes it takes a while to get in front of your right audience, but you're keeping up your consistent voice. once you get in front of that audience, they're with you. Because you
Completely.
weren't just
And they want to
generic.
see a journey too. Like your early fans
Yeah.
probably are so excited to see your evolution as a creator
Yeah.
because we're all on growth journeys throughout the course of our lives. Even for people to be able to see the vulnerability or what that shift looks like can be really rewarding for whatever it is that's going on in their individual lives.
So, okay, you brought up the idea of social currency with me, and I have heard of social currency before. I've also used the word social capital.
Yeah.
In my head, those are similar, the same. I don't know if you feel that way,
Yeah.
but how would you define social currency for the person who's just hearing that term?
Yeah, it's a great question. When we think about the ways in which we designate value, I think there's a lot of things that first come to mind. When you think of currency, you're thinking of dollars or, just monetary currency. But the truth is, who you are and how you show up also carries a currency. How you're engaging in different environments. When you help out a neighbor or you help out an unexpected stranger on the street, there's value that you have created and people remember that. While social currency can be really tough to measure, it is something that accrues and compounds just like traditional currency. You never know when you need to cash in that check, but it'll be there. And I think that's, when we think about when you can, someone probably comes to mind for you when you're like, I was in a tough spot and I really needed a favor and that person came through and you remember that. That is a form of social currency, right?
For
It's
sure.
about how you're able to create influence within the networks you're a part of.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with that, there's that idea of like some people will talk about with networking, like making deposits, right, in this bank account. But like you said, it's not something that you actually measure. Like you
Yeah.
don't want to be the person who's like tit for tat of, well, I've made 5 deposits in this social currency bank account with
Yeah.
this person, so they owe me this. It's not that, but there is a little bit of like a general keeping tabs in your head of,
Yeah.
have I been helping people? I think
Yes.
part of what makes people feel gross around networking is that they know they're asking favors when they haven't put in any social currency, when they haven't put in any,
Yeah.
care ahead of time.
Yep.
And so it's keeping a pulse on that, is what I'm hearing.
Completely. And it's so funny. Like, I have heard so many women across all age groups recently, I feel like it's come up more, talking about like networking has such a interesting sentiment, I want to say, around it. Like people feel like it's this like dreaded thing. I don't want to do it. And it's funny to me because I was actually thinking about this earlier today, knowing we were going to have this conversation. And it's like, I have like a few different coffee shops I love going to in the West Village. And like that is a networking opportunity. But it doesn't have to be these like
Yes.
formal settings. It's like how you interact with other people, like smiling at your neighbor. There's little things you can do that again feed social currency. And I think there's a massive opportunity for us to redefine our understanding and relationship with networking because for so long, and I think there's a reason why it has felt corporate, especially for women as we have risen through the ranks in the professional environments. But I think that's definitely evolving, and we absolutely should be having more conversations about how to make it feel natural because the word itself, the sentiment needs to change.
Yes. Like I would love to use a different word. That's why I say building professional relationships. A
Yeah,
lot of networking is the word people know. I would love to I would love to rebrand it,
I
but
know.
because yes, it does leave such a bad taste in so many people's mouths, but you're right. I give this example a lot. If people listen a lot, they know. I used to go to a Starbucks when I lived in LA. I went to the same Starbucks every
Yeah.
morning and worked, and the same people worked. And a lot of those people worked in television. The baristas all wanted to be actors, and they had built relationships
Yeah.
with their customers who came in every day that while it would normally be inappropriate to slide their flyer across and go, hey, I'm having a comedy show on Friday night, because these were people that they knew
Yeah.
and talked to every day, people would take it and go, oh my gosh, I can't wait to go. What is it? Tell me more. Like, that is networking.
Yeah.
You can meet someone in line at the grocery store and network. You don't have to, but you
Totally.
can,
And I
you
think
know?
it's like maybe we can talk a little bit more about this because I'm sure this is interesting to
Yeah.
people, like how you kind of discern like what the best approach is because networking gets a challenging sentiment. And I think a lot of salespeople get a bad rep too, because it feels like you're being sold to, right? And like someone's
Yeah,
coming to you with a favor. Like you said, they haven't put in that like relationship building aspect, but there's ways to do it where it feels more organic or a softer sell. Like I want to
for
be able
sure.
to help people, but like if it comes across as like, I don't even know what your take is on it, but when someone comes to you and it's clearly intended to be a one-sided exchange, I think that's where it
Yeah.
starts to feel a little off.
Yes, I completely agree. I think that's where, to me, that's why I love to talk about it as relationship
Yeah.
building, because it's probably whatever you want
Yeah.
isn't going to happen on the first call, the first coffee, etc.
Mhm.
Like we all have had that magical moment where I've had two different times where I've been on planes and sat next to someone that we hit it off and there was a job offer.
Oh, I
Did I
love
take it? No.
that.
Is there a job
Yeah.
offer? Yeah. Like there are those weird times that it happens, but for the most part, it's a patience
Yeah.
game and people don't have patience. And I think a lot of it comes down to asking too soon.
Yeah.
Going with what you're talking about. It's like there is a time and a place where, and it doesn't mean you have to give. I'm so just so you know, I'm very big here on like, I don't even believe in give and take networking. I
Yeah.
feel like that's the new brand
Oh,
of
that's
networking of
interesting.
it's give and take, give value, give value, give value. Well, that's still all about you. You're
Yeah.
still being like, how do I sound impressive? What am I doing me? And
Yeah.
instead, and it's transactional.
Right, completely.
My thing is that's still transactional. Really, what we need to do is just care for people. And
Completely.
so, if you've cared for somebody, if they feel cared for, then when you, hey, would you come to my webinar
Yeah.
on Saturday?
Yeah.
Send this to some people. Sure.
Yeah.
Will you introduce me to that person? No problem. But I think a lot of it is in like, just like every other relationship
Yeah.
in your life that you have to develop,
Yeah.
these have to develop too. And some develop really fast, and some are years and years before
Totally.
there's a payoff. That's how
Totally.
I see it. What's your thoughts on it?
I mean, we all need to lean into care. I think what can be challenging is when it is a stranger, you probably start to think through methodically, how can I express care? And I've been in interactions that I can feel that from the other person. I'll give
Yeah.
grace and be like, look at someone's intention. And I give like candid feedback all the time because I just personally love that.
Mhm.
But it's like, I think active listening is such a great tool to use in creating genuine moments of care, right? Let's say there
Yeah.
are 2 to 3 things you really need desperately, and maybe there's someone that comes to mind. Opening it up and just asking them questions, or not, like you said, coming right out the gate with an ask, but there's some really savvy ways you can showcase care and still highlight in a real way that there are certain things that would be really helpful to you, and why does that matter to you? Like even understanding someone's why can be so powerful.
Yeah. Part of my thing with giving care over giving value,
Yeah.
or just the idea of care first, is what I say is that it doesn't have to be, because I know the pressure you're talking about when you're
Yeah.
seeing someone be like, how do I angle this?
You like see it
Just
in real
being the
time.
person who follows up and like you said, active listening. Let's say we met at Starbucks and you were running late to a big lunch meeting and we just happened to be in line and we exchanged, we hit it off enough to exchange emails or something. Care is me just following up and saying, hey, did you make it to that meeting? How
Yeah.
did it go?
Right.
I don't need to offer anything yet.
Yeah.
I don't know what you need.
Yeah.
Meeting.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people get it wrong, is they think it has to be this
Yeah.
like out of the box thing, and it's like, just care for another individual.
Totally.
I do agree that you get savvier over time how to hit those nuances and how to find ways in maybe a little faster. But in the beginning, I think if people are like, okay, I'm just flexing this networking muscle, I think what you said is like, just start by being an active listener.
Yeah.
And then what can you say off of that? And sometimes people don't give a lot of nuggets to pick up on, that what you say is, it was so great talking to you.
Yeah.
Can I help you in the future? That's it.
Totally. Or like, let's just stay, it would be great to stay connected. Like,
Stay
who knows
connected.
what will come up down the line, but it is so true. And like, something I was thinking about too is like building those relationships throughout different phases of your life, because I feel like we as a society have been so good at like doubling down on the importance of networking and all of that. Like I heard it so much like when I was in
Yeah.
high school, when I was in college, and somewhere along the way, like I had to revisit my relationship with intentional networking as my goals evolved and as I, rose
Yeah.
through the ranks as a senior leader. And so I think those are some interesting things to think about because there's so many individuals I know that are like established in their careers will start to think that, maybe intentional networking isn't something that is what they need to do. And I would really challenge that again, because you never know what's around the corner
Right.
and when you might need something or where you can add value again. Like I think we should think
Right.
about that a lot more as we continue to rise through the ranks and gain seniority.
Yeah. So how are some of the ways that that changed for you as you rose through the ranks and even as you pivoted out?
Well, it's a great question because I felt that I had such limited capacity when I was a senior leader at a fast
Hmm.
paced tech company. So my bandwidth was any relationships that I was building were really like narrowly focused on what do I need now in terms of what's adding value in the equation of like this company and what my professional goals are
Yep.
as it relates to this company. I didn't even have capacity to think beyond that. And so it's funny because looking back, if I knew that I was going to go on this founder journey and lean into my own creator career, how I would have networked and the relationships I might have taken more time to build then, I realize now, like my playbook would have been totally different, right? And even now,
Yeah.
what's interesting is I'm meeting all kinds of different business owners, which has been so helpful for me to hear about their stories. I just appreciate who they are. I really resonate with. I now am like
Yeah.
building those types of relationships to say, when someone asks me in this new context, in these new environments I'm in, who is a great designer that I could be in touch with, I have a whole new Rolodex that is expansive to the network that I had in place prior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think too, that is something going back to the first part of what you said, people get busy in their careers and kind of go, I don't have the bandwidth for this.
Yeah.
And maybe the pace that you're building new relationships is not the same as maybe a 24-year-old that is just starting in a sales career, let's say,
Yeah.
right? But like you want to keep up with the relationships you already had. I
Yeah.
think even that is something that people kind of let go of. And it's like, y'all, even that holiday email or e-card
Yeah.
once a year can do a lot of good,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, it's just little touch points to remind people like, I'm here and I was thinking of you. Like, I will just text people out of the blue if they pop into my head. Like, no rhyme or reason, just be like,
My
I just
favorite.
thought of you today. I hope I hope you're doing well. And it's just like, it's easy. It doesn't require much. And then they're just like, that's nice. Like, it's nice to see a little note from Ash. And so there's so many just easy ways you can kind of like continue to nurture those touch points without it being this massive involved thing.
Yes. You actually just touched on my favorite thing of all
Yeah.
time. Is like the easiest thing in the world is if you thought of somebody, tell them.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
that,
It's really
see
that
something that
simple.
reminds you of them.
Yeah.
We kind of started to touch on this. I would love to hear more of your thoughts on when people are trying to build social currency, what are some of the mistakes that are being made that we want to try and avoid?
Great question. We did touch on this. There's probably multiple different elements here, but I think the biggest challenge that people fall into is the inauthenticity, how much you know yourself, which again, that evolves over time. Because when you're coming from a place where you're just so clear on, like, this is something that I need, or this is how I'm looking to create care or value for others, and it's so connected to your why and where you're at. I think that we're all humans at the end of the day. And so the connection points are there, right? Like there's so many different experiences we all have in our life, whether there's professional highs and lows you go through or losses and gains in your life. Like personally, like there's so many human experiences we can all relate to. And like that's what you want to connect it back to. And I think the negative or like where people kind of miss the mark with social currency is you're trying to build it. And sometimes in trying to build it, it becomes very clear that that's exactly what you're doing. It's not there
Right.
organically, but it can feel forced. And that creates a lack of trust, which, in the sales world, is we're always talking about. Like, no one's going to buy from you if they don't trust your intentions. So I think that's a huge part of it, is like understanding how to create that trust.
So how should someone create that trust?
It's a great question. I think getting really clear on your why and your message, really being curious. I think that's so important, because if you have the curiosity about yourself, where you are, where you're looking to be, you can also, I think it always starts with you. I always go back to like, it starts with you. And then if you can do it for yourself, you can do it for others. So being kind and compassionate to yourself, being curious about your own viewpoints and thoughts at times, and being willing to have that evolve, because that will translate to the individuals that you are collaborating with. And I think they'll be able to feel that.
No, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I
Yeah.
understand. I'm hearing what you're saying. Part of it is like sitting there, knowing your why
Yeah.
is everything to me. So I'm
Yeah.
totally with you on that. Uh, let's go back to that authenticity
Yeah.
piece. Like, hey, you have to be authentic.
Yeah.
I will be honest.
Yeah.
I am honest to a fault.
I
I
love
might be a
that.
little too
Yeah, I
authentic at
know. Trust
times.
me.
So,
I'm in that
like,
camp. I'm in that camp.
I sometimes don't understand when people aren't authentic. And it doesn't, and I don't mean that from like an unsympathetic place or anything. My brain doesn't know how to help, because I just come from like, well, you're just you. And if I look foolish, I look foolish. Like, who
Yeah.
cares? I'm not
Yeah.
posturing. So I'm curious if you have thoughts on what are some things to help people become more authentic within situations with other people.
Yeah, great question. And the one thing I'll add before I respond is, I feel like
Yeah.
people often that like, if you were having an engagement with someone and they're coming across as inauthentic, from what I've seen, because the same as you, I'm so fascinated with this, and I've really like looked into it as like a people leader, and I realize like oftentimes like they don't realize that it is coming across as inauthentic. So like let's start there. Like you could be
Interesting.
listening and
Okay.
realize that like you show up in conversations for the listeners like in an inauthentic way at times. And so I think like it's not an obvious thing that people may necessarily
Yeah.
feel. One of the things I would challenge people to do is, I feel like I'm very blunt that way too, is like you can feel it in your body. I can't say that I am authentic 100% of the time. I intend to be, but there are environments that I show up in where I can tell I'm a little uneasy. I'm a
Yeah.
huge psychology nerd too, so I've like geeked out into a lot of like those aspects of it, is like
Yeah.
you can have these feelings in your body and not even realize they're driven by unconscious thoughts. And especially for us as women, we are taught to show up a certain way. So you could be in the context of like, I'm thinking of like business networking events and things we encourage a lot of people to do for professional development. You might go there and there's actually, I think, like some really interesting stats around how many people tend to be uncomfortable in those formal environments. And the best place to actually meet someone at a networking event is by the bar, because alcohol is a social lubricant and that puts people at ease. But that goes to show it's just a lack of comfort that takes place. And so
Yeah.
I would challenge people to think about and ask themselves, because the answer varies, like, what is it that is stirring up those feelings? Because if you were with your best friend, everyone, when they're with their best friend, they're authentic. You're saying exactly how you feel. So you kind of have to, that's where I say get curious about what's going on with you, because why you might show up inauthentically in different environments has to do with your own experiences, the stories we tell ourselves about certain environments. Like if I was at an all women's event, I have an easier time sometimes being my whole self and showing up with my girly tendencies that I embrace. But if I'm in
Right.
a setting with a bunch of men who don't look anything like me and they're a lot older, definitely when I was younger, I felt this need to show up a certain way to fit in. And I think it has to do with
Yeah.
belonging. And the more you get clear on, no, I have something to contribute in this room, I feel good about that, that's going to help you be more authentic in different spaces. So I think the context of the spaces is important to consider too.
I think that's a really good thing to bring up. I think there is a difference between feeling inauthentic and just feeling uncomfortable. Like there's
Okay.
a lot that's come out now around, people love to say I have social anxiety. And it's
Yeah.
like there is a real level of social
Yeah.
anxiety, but there also seems to be this misnomer with certain groups of just going, I feel uncomfortable, so I have social anxiety. It's like, well, no, a first date makes everyone
Yeah.
uncomfortable. Into your first networking event to a
Yeah.
room full of strangers is going
Yes.
to make you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I still think there's something to
Yeah.
recognizing, like you're saying, oh, this is just uncomfortable. I can
Mhm.
still be me,
Yeah.
but maybe also it would be inappropriate to act the way you are with your best friend with a bunch of men at a networking
Right.
event. I think there's something too of it's
Yeah.
making me think to bring it
Yeah.
up of just to clarify for everyone, being authentic doesn't mean you have to be, I don't want to say you're still bringing your whole self to things, but it doesn't mean you have to reveal every part of
Right.
yourself in every place, because that would be
Yeah.
inappropriate and frankly unsafe.
Totally.
Like
Yeah. You got to
logically
think
unsafe.
about
Like,
which sides of yourself you want to have show up in those environments. But
right.
I think it is that it's the feelings that drive the behavior, right? So,
Yes.
whatever reason it is, like, yeah, absolutely do not. Sometimes, like, the sales bros are cool, and I'm like, bringing my full
Yeah.
self there too. But there are certain times where if you're feeling not like relaxed and at ease in your body, I think it tends to be a somatic experience. I think that is more likely to lead to the outcomes where maybe you're like fumbling with your words, or maybe you meant to
Right.
say something but you said something else. And that's where I think human to human, people can like feel you. Like you can feel when someone's like calm in the room and they're so clear on like what they're doing or like where they need help, and you're like, "Oh, I like really love how that person just said that," or "I like really want to work with that
Right.
person," because like you can feel how that comes across.
Yes. And I think with what you're saying, with those moments where, right, it's that uncomfortability that's tipping into inauthentic,
Yeah.
that it's looking at that and going like, wait, I don't have to be somebody else in this moment.
Yeah.
And like you said, like then it's taking that moment. And I do actually suggest people do this before going to events, taking that moment and thinking about like, why am I here?
Yes.
What do I bring to the table?
Right.
Power pose it out in the bathroom if you
Yes.
need. Do the things you need to do to be able to bring your authentic self.
Yeah. 100%. I think
That's
knowing,
my thought.
especially if you're like showing up in certain spaces, like think about, why are you going? What does success look like for you there? You chose to show up for a certain reason. And I think a little bit of planning can go a long way in those settings too.
Yeah. So you mentioned for young professionals, I have people at all ages just in this
Yeah.
audience. You mentioned like the way I thought about networking then compared to now, it does change over time. I think that's a really good thing to bring up and something we might have to explore more over
Yeah.
here. But for the young person, honestly, this is a question I'm going to say for the young professional, but it actually can go to a lot of people.
Yeah.
What are some strategies you think of to build that currency, build that relationship building? They feel like I don't really have a lot of experience or I don't have connections. I feel like not ready for this in some way. Or like I get a lot of people who feel like I don't have anything to give.
Oh, that's interesting. And I can see, yeah, I remember, this is just a quick story. I remember I got
Yeah.
invited to a highly influential dinner when I was in my early 20s. Everyone was so much older than me, and we were going around telling our stories. And I remember I was like so stressed about what I was going to say for that exact reason. I was like, what do I bring to this room? These people are so wildly successful. I'm 20. I don't know how I got an invite to this space. I don't belong
Right.
here. To this day, I don't remember exactly what I said because I was so in awe of everyone. But it is very much a relatable experience. And I think, again, like as our goals change in life, whether you're mid career or later stage in your career, as that evolves, you're still thinking about the different ways in which you bring value. But that's a good, I mean, again, I think it comes down to like, why are you looking to make certain connections? And I think a lot of people actually have grace for and actually appreciate. People embrace you coming to the table and saying, "I'm not sure. I'm here because
Yeah.
I'm looking to get more clarity on what my next steps are." Like if you don't know, I think that's okay, and we should normalize that, because to say
Yep.
that you are here because you're looking to do one specific thing when deep down that's not true, like that would be inauthentic. Like it's better to actually show up and
Yeah.
say, I'm trying to figure out my next career move, or I'm exploring this industry and I'm just looking to better understand what my options are. I remember thinking about this in the world of marketing when I thought I wanted to hyper focus my career on marketing. Do you know how many different types of marketers there are? Social media, paid
Gosh.
media, like there's
Yep.
so many kinds. How could one person possibly know exactly what it is that you'd want to do? You have to have those conversations. And I think people are always willing to talk about themselves, right? I mean, I feel that way in terms of just mentorship. I'm like, let me tell you everything I wish I had known, you know?
Yeah.
So I think being honest about where you stand is really helpful.
Yeah, people love to talk about themselves and they love to give advice.
Yes.
So, yes, what you can offer a lot of times when you think I don't have experience or connections is what you said, just going, "Hey, I'm unsure about this thing. Can you help me?" They're like, "Yes, please. I'd love to help you." People love
Yes.
to do that. And you're right, that is authentic. I would rather you tell me that than posture
Yeah.
and pretend that
Yeah.
you have something you don't.
Yeah, totally.
So you had brought up a concept like earlier before we recorded, you brought up a concept of 15 by 15 or
Yes.
15x,
Yes.
something I
Yeah.
love a framework
Oh, I know.
by
This is
15.
something I've been playing with, and I have like I said, the past
Okay.
year, I've been reflecting a lot, especially with, like I've been leaning more into mentoring young women and working with founders specifically too, who are, like, leaving the corporate world. So, what I have started to wrap my head around, and I think this plays into everything around, like, alignment and knowing who you are. So, I look at it as, like, the first 15, it's the first 15 years of your life, right? Like, you are growing up in the environment that you're growing up in. You are it's kind of just automatic. You're learning from your peers, your parents, and you're not really questioning to think about like deeper meaningful things. You're just there's this kind
Yeah.
of automatic track that you're on. That's like the first 15 years you're not consciously thinking about. Then what I've started to see with women is when you're in that middle stage, like those next 15 years from like 15 to 30, those are so pivotal where you start to actually reflect on the first 15 years and whether or not you're aware of it, but they're directly shaping that evolution, right? So you start to
Mhm.
actually question your patterns of behavior or why you're doing what you're doing. I can't tell you how many women, I'm a millennial, and how many like millennial women I know who are leaving like corporate environments because we thought like we had to just rise through the ranks. And they're like, you know what? I'm going to go be an acupuncturist instead. So I think
Yeah.
like that second 15 is where you're really getting to know yourself in a deeper way and starting to question what it is that are actually your goals and not just influence from your surroundings and what you've been taught and told. And I think from there, that sets you up for the X, which is what do you now want to make of your life and how do you want to contribute? How do you want to give back? I think there's a lot of kind of frameworks, kind of with sub frameworks within there that we can like dive deeper into depending on what individuals are looking to accomplish. But I think like breaking it out into those two segments is really helpful
Yeah.
because it's a normal experience. Like we all kind of go through it. And it's so silly to say that those initial 15 years aren't shaping fundamentally your values and how you move through the world. And I think the more you get curious about that, the more you can delineate what are your true values and where you really stand compared to where some of the noise that comes in from society and your surroundings that you've told yourself feel right, but may not actually resonate.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. In fact, that I'm going to get nerdy for a second. When
Yes.
I was in, so I have my master's degree in higher education and student affairs. So we
Awesome.
study the development of college students.
Okay.
And my favorite theory from then is about self-authorship
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
But it's the idea of being self-authored. And honestly, I'm kind of shocked that this hasn't become like
Yeah.
a TikTok trend since everyone wants
I
to know
know.
themselves better,
I
like,
know.
since they're obsessed with the fact that attachment
Oh,
theory
I know. I
into Gen
know. I
Z, I'm like, "Wow."
know.
Um,
But it's made such
but
a
you
huge
might wanna
difference.
look
I'm almost
in
like, why did we not figure this out sooner?
so it's not the same thing exactly that
Yeah.
you're talking about, but I think it's something you might wanna go look up. I
Yeah.
think you might find it interesting because it's this idea of, like, when does it become like, I take reins on this,
Yeah.
and what's interesting is they're seeing with younger generations, it's not happening
Oh,
in the same way.
interesting.
Even, like, with students when I worked in a college, I totally remember when I graduated that desire to please my parents with
Yeah.
my career choices. They were not going to be happy. I wanted to work in television. I even got jobs in television and still
Yeah.
wasn't great. And they
Yeah.
came around. But I understood that it was like, but it's my life. Like at a certain point, you go, I'm going to not please my parent
Yeah.
to do what I want to do, what I
Yeah.
think I want to do. And then you start thinking more through what you want to do. I think that breakaway is number one. This theory kind of is part of that. And now working with college students, I would see that went along even well past graduation now
Yeah.
of like, no, but I have to do what they want. And that's why I think we're getting so many people
Yeah.
kind of waking up later and going, "Ooh, I don't know if this is what I want." And don't get me wrong, I still obviously I'm not in television anymore. I've career pivoted twice since then.
Yeah.
So
Which we should normalize. Like
but
I said, it
right,
evolves.
totally normal.
Yeah.
You're allowed to change your mind. That's like
Completely.
my big one. You can
Yeah.
change your mind. But so yeah, there is so much from those first years. And I think that second 15 that you're talking about, there's so the amount of changes that someone can go through, right? You get
Yeah.
that first career and you realize, "Oh, this isn't what I thought." Like for example, marketing isn't what I thought marketing
Totally. Totally.
was,
Like,
you know?
yeah. Yeah.
Again.
And it's interesting too, because like in allowing yourself evolve, it's funny. Like I really have been reflecting so much on this. Like when I first broke into tech more formally in New York, and it was specifically retail tech and omni-channel tech, basically 24-year-old me was so excited to work with Sephora and Coty, all these major beauty brands. And just, I was like, I love
Mhm.
shopping. Like that's, and I was so fascinated with it, and all of that's true. And that's what motivated me. But on a deeper level too, like as I rose through the ranks and from a seniority perspective, I had to question like, what is this drive about? You know what I mean? Like, even though
Mhm.
my parents wanted me to be a doctor, I quickly said no to that. So I was able to kind
Yeah.
of like, no, like that's no. I'm gonna like
You're
faint
like,
at the sight
"No."
of blood. Absolutely not. But I was like,
Yeah.
I want to be in business. And I was like dead set on that. And then everything's a business. So how do you hone in on that further? So I was like,
Right.
text the future. And, I want to work with amazing beauty brands and retail brands. And then as you start to get older and you're doing all of this, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm learning amazing skills and I'm really having fun, but like, so what?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that shifts, and those are natural shifts, and I don't regret it at all. Working with those brands has been amazing. But then it becomes and then what? And how do I want to
Yeah.
now give back? And, where do I want to spend my time and skill set?
Yeah. And I think that is something, honestly, that I think more people need to take time and sit down and reflect on. What you're talking about is kind of a really nice exercise to maybe do once a year, once every couple year, or like add to it, right? Do
Yeah.
your first next 15 and
Yeah.
then do now, and then next year look at it again and go, am I still in alignment? Am I
Yeah.
not? It's a nice little recalibration
Yeah.
marker.
And you know what I will say too, because I
Yeah.
see this and I resonate with it. It can be easy. So if anyone's going through this and listening right now, pay close attention. It can be easy to give yourself all kinds of excuses for why you shouldn't sit down and reflect. I know people who are like, I'm too busy. I need the paycheck to keep coming in, and you're miserable. I cannot tell you how
Yeah.
many women, I work mainly with women, but how many women have come to me eventually they're super burnt out, and I'm like, hey, I think you should maybe think about a plan to proactively get out of this. And then a few months later they're let go, or something happens where it's like an unexpected moment, right? And so it's like, if
Yeah.
you are feeling that type of like stress, or something isn't resonating about like whatever aspect of your life, I promise you it's better to slow down and work in some capacity to try to get ahead of it. And again, it doesn't have to be these like big plans you have to make, but like go to a coffee
No.
shop and talk to like people that you wouldn't typically, do. Because you never know what opportunities are around the corner, but we convince ourselves that we don't have the time, or we're, under some kind of
Yeah.
fire. And it's very much self-created, I've found.
For sure.
I think
Well, and
reflection's
also I
important.
think with reflection activities, and this it goes really well with another podcast guest. It was a good podcast. Caitlin and I talked about knowing yourself better to know others better.
Yeah.
She brought up some activities in that one too. So y'all put show notes. I'll link to that one because these
Yeah.
pair nicely. I brought this up in that one too, that anytime we talk about self-reflection, people think that like, okay, I need to set aside at least half a day, and it needs to be in some beautiful setting that's really going to inspire me. Like I need to go to the mountains or the ocean, or like I need to do, no, you know what you need? You need a notebook
Yeah. Yeah.
and you need about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's
Totally.
what we got. We don't
Yeah.
got the ocean right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
We don't have the birds chirping,
Yeah.
but we've got 30 minutes. So take it.
Yeah.
It really doesn't take as much as we think it does
Yeah.
to start figuring. It might take more to unpack it, But to get that process going doesn't have to be this crazy
Yeah, totally.
experience, you know?
Yeah, I completely agree, and if you feel like you can't even do that, I mean, I'm a huge fan of just taking 10 minutes to just sit and breathe, like, just do some
Yeah.
breathing exercises, like, if you feel so overwhelmed that you can't even create the space to journal, which that's a challenge in itself, you should be able to take 30
Yeah.
minutes to do that, but, like, it really is about those micro steps that you can expand upon, so there's no reason not to do reflecting, and I feel like we've normalized it for relationships, like, between therapists that exist, attachment theory, all of it. It's like when you go from failed relationship to failed relationship, or we don't call them failures or learnings, but when it doesn't work, this isn't working, this isn't like where I want to be. We've normalized, I think, as American society to look at, okay, what worked and what didn't. How would I maybe want to show up differently in my next relationship? There's a clear growth that takes place there. Something that I've seen with individuals and like I've experienced in my own life too is those patterns that you actually have in relationships can show up in work as well. If you take out time to think about other aspects of your life, like your health and wellness, your relationships, your financial status, then, it's really important to take it out as it relates to work as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I know we need to wrap up.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for being here. I think this is a really helpful conversation on kind of it's a nice balance of introspection and
Yeah.
then how do you use that out in the world. So I loved having this convo with you.
Likewise.
Um, all your info will be in the show notes, but where can people find you? Tell us a little bit more about the overachievers.
Yeah. So my go-to website is www.ashgraywall.com. You can also access www.theoverachievehers.com, but it's also linked on my main website. And we're actually doing our fall launch October 20th in New York City. Everyone who's interested is welcome to join. But if you go to the Overachievers website and fill out the early access form, you'll get a lot more information on what this looks like, who's a part of it, and all of the amazing things we have planned. I am willing to offer a special discount to your listeners. For any woman
That'd be
who
great.
wants to network intentionally with like minded women across industry, age, race, and geography, I'm really hyper focused on empowering more women to recognize that they are capable of creating change across different aspects of their lives. We're all about doers and making the world a better place. When women are empowered, we accomplish a lot of amazing things together.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll put all of that in the show notes and the description for those watching on YouTube. Thank you so much for being with me. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm going to link to that other conversation with Caitlin if you want to carry on the conversation about knowing yourself better. That is a great next one to go listen to. So I'll see you over there. Bye.